If you want to feel more connected to humanity and a little less alone, listen to Beautiful Anonymous. Each week, I take a phone call from one random anonymous human being. There's over 400 episodes in our back catalog. You get to feel connected to all these different people all over the world. Recent episodes include one where a lady survived a murder attempt by her own son. But then the week before that, we just talked about Star Trek. It can be anything. It's unpredictable. It's raw. It's real. Get Beautiful Anonymous wherever you listen to podcasts.
911, what's the nature of your emergency?
Good morning, police, fire, military, and families, and to everybody listening in on the Tactical Living Podcast. I'm your host, Ashley Walton. Our guest is joining us from Italy right now, so we have about a 3-second delay or so, if you guys could just bear with us. Good morning, everybody. This is Andrew Serra. Andrew, how are you?
Good morning, Ashley. I'm good. Thank you for having me.
You are a New York retired fire captain, but you're also an author of historical fiction, and you have a story to share with us. But something I was really curious about, because I learned that you served for 25 years, and we thank you for your service. But from seeing you, what that would also mean is that during 9/11, you were a very young firefighter. So if you don't mind, just to the extent that you're comfortable with, just kind of share with us a little bit about what that was like for you.
Yeah, like you said, I was still pretty young. I had about 3 years on the fire department on 9/11, and I was scheduled to work that day, and I had switched with another member of my company because I was attending college classes at the time, and I had a class that Tuesday morning. So I switched shifts with him, and I was home. And when my alarm clock went off in the morning for my class, I heard the radio flipped on, and I heard the DJ talking about that a plane had hit the World Trade Center. So I came downstairs and I put the TV on, and I saw what had happened. And I immediately drove to my firehouse, like all off-duty firefighters did. They reported to the firehouse immediately. And basically, the trucks and all the on-duty members of my firehouse had already responded to the World Trade Center. So the rest of us, there was a hardware store across the street from the firehouse. They loaned us a tool truck, and we loaded it up and we drove there on our own. And we got there, I think it was right around the time of the second collapse. We arrived downtown, and then we were there for pretty much the next 24 hours, and then on and off over the coming months. So that was starting from that day forward.
And I appreciate you sharing that. And when I was listening to you do another interview, you guys were talking about how we kind of look at things like pre 9/11 and then post 9/11. And it's such a fundamental time that people might have experienced to be looking at it that way. And I can't even imagine what that would have been like. And something really apparent to me is that you seem to have this incredibly rich attachment to culture and history. And I'm wondering if there might have been any kind of connection between everything that happened with the 9/11 and kind of where you are now. And we are going to get into the history side of things and the books that you've written.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's all connected in a lot of ways. Like, I think I've always been a history buff and interested in various, periods of history, and always read, nonfiction and fiction, history books. It's always been a passion of mine. But even just as you're saying, tying it into work and life, and I mean, 9/11. I remember the day that it happened, talking with coworkers of mine, and we felt immediately the historical significance of what we were experiencing at that moment. There was really no escaping it. We knew, the saying at the time, it was like it was our generation's Pearl Harbor, and I think in a lot of ways that was true. That it's as you said, it's like a before and after moment. For us, we that's the moment in time where everything else is measured against, and I think maybe that did perhaps make me view my interest in history a little bit different, and the things I wanted to write about, and definitely the way I approached my subjects writing about it. Maybe with these taking the human experience that's common to all people across historical periods, but tying that into these like great historical moments that tend to coincide with their lives, and tying those two things together. And I think most of my historical fiction novels have some kind of major historical moment, and then also, a focus on the lives that are experiencing this moment and what it means for them and their relationships and their, lives going forward.
Yeah, that must have been a horrible sight to see. Yeah, absolutely. Like in person, I couldn't even fathom it, because we were all paying witness to what was happening on our TV screens. I don't want to forget, we are doing a giveaway. We have a Hawaiian shaped ice mini snow cone machine, and then I will let you choose whichever syrup you like. So if you guys have questions or comments, drop them down below, and whoever comments the most in the next 24 hours, I will send it your way. If you won last time, then you can't win this time, but you can win next time. And, Andrew, you shared something about the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory Fire, and I had never heard of this before. So can you tell us, like nobody knows, what happened? What was that?
Right. And, I realize that outside of New York City, it may not be as well known of a historical event, but it's definitely still relevant today, even across the country and world in a lot of ways. And that's why it was an interesting subject for me. The Triangle Shirtwaist Factory Fire was a large workplace fire that took place in 1911. Shirtwaist, if you're not familiar with the term, it was a lady's garment from right around the turn of the 20th century. It was like a silk women's blouse that was very popular at the time. It was one of the most popular women's fashions, and the Triangle Shirtwaist Company was the leading manufacturer of shirtwaists probably in the country at the time. The owners were very wealthy. It was a very large operation. They had numerous factories set up across the city. The factory, the Triangle factory where the fire took place, they had over 500 workers at that location. It was a very large, at the time, modern building. It was a 10-story loft with concrete, steel, and wood. And, it was considered a modern building. But the Triangle factory were on the top 3 floors, the 8th, 9th, and 10th floor. And when fire broke out on the 8th floor, hundreds of workers were trapped basically above the fire with no way out. One of the exit stairs had been padlocked shut to prevent stealing by the owners. So the workers were funneled out of just one functional staircase, which was not enough for emergency exit. And basically, hundreds of workers were left with terrible choices. There was no way out, and it ends up that dozens ended up jumping to their death from the 9th floor windows. And it was at a time when it was a Saturday afternoon in the spring in Washington Square Park section of New York City. So there were a lot of people out on the street. There were newspaper reporters and photographers. So it was a very public event. And these people, mostly young women, young immigrant women, were trapped up. And it happened in real time in front of hundreds and hundreds of witnesses of, the drama played out. And they were eventually just forced to jump down to the street. So it really captured, in a terrible way, it captured the public's imagination at the time. And it ended up leading to a lot of changes in workplace safety laws that is still in effect today, actually. So it, and there's a lot of facets to the story that I tried to tie together, because there had been a struggle for change before, but it just, due to politics, it wasn't able to happen. And once this fire happened, then that was a catalyst for a lot of change.
Hell's Half Acre. I'm not sure what that is.
Hell's 100 Acres.
Oh, 100
is
100, Matthew.
Right. It's a nickname for this section of the city where mostly in the late 19th century, early 20th century, factory lofts were congregated. It was a heavy manufacturing center of part of the city, and these giant loft buildings, they were, some 6 stories, some 8 stories, some 10 stories, which is a very tall building for the time. And they were very large building with open floor spaces for manufacturing. So when there were fires in these buildings, they were very deadly. So a fire commissioner in sometime in the 1950s basically gave a nickname to this section of the city called Hell's 100 Acres. So that's where the name ties in.
Oh, I see. Now, of all the things that you could have written about, especially with 25 years in service, what drew you to this story?
First and foremost, it was my last firehouse where I spent the last 11 years of my career was Ladder Company 20, which is located right in the center of this district. And when this fire occurred in 1911, my company, Ladder 20, was one of the first units to arrive at the scene, and they were involved in the operation and a number of the rescues and such. So it was a very prominent event in the history of my firehouse. So it was always foremost in our thoughts. And once I retired and I was looking for, my next subject to write about, the history of the fire department and my firehouse kind of came to mind. And then from there, it grew into, what was, the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory Fire was one of the biggest events in the history of the fire department and my firehouse in particular. And it kind of grew from there. And then I researched the entire event and the people who worked there. And I tried to make it a larger story about the politicians at the time and the factory owners who helped create these conditions, the workers, mostly immigrants who, lived before in, very hard conditions and were affected by this event, and also the firefighters and the real life, responders who responded to the fire. So I tried to tie it all together into one story.
Yeah, and I love it when people keep stories like that alive. Like we have to, we absolutely have to. And you made mention that you were looking on what you should write about next. So it's my understanding that you unfortunately lost 5 people at your fire department during 9/11. And you had said that you didn't think that you could ever write a book about that when everybody kept asking you.
Yeah, I've been writing for a long time, and people would ask me a lot if are you ever going to write something about 9/11? I guess it was just probably a natural question to ask for somebody who's writing and was there. And I never thought I could. I think for a long time I felt the emotions, not so much that they were just still raw, but that I couldn't wrap my head around organizing my thoughts or finding a way to tell a story or tell it all. I would feel like it would be too much to take on to try and boil it all down to a coherent, either story or not so much history of the whole event, but even just my part of the story. And for a long time, I really thought that's how it would be. And it took about 15 years. It wasn't until I want to say it was around 2016. One day I was sitting around the house with my laptop, and I just had a spark of an idea, and I, just banged out the first chapter all in one sitting. And I thought to myself, like, that was okay. I think I can do this. It kind of motivated me a little bit to delve into it deeper. And that's when I put that chapter aside, and then I really went into research, because my book in particular isn't really just it's not a straightforward memoir, and it's certainly not a comprehensive history of the 9/11 attacks or events. It's part memoir, I like to call it, and part investigative history. And basically it's a story about one particular fire company who responded that they were all killed that day. And one particular member, the title is Finding John, a firefighter named John Tipping, who died that day, who a couple of months after September 11th, me and a crew of recovery workers on the overnight shift at the Trade Center site, we found the remains of this firefighter, John Tipping. So I didn't know him in life, but I felt a connection to him. It was like a moment that always stayed with me. It was a very kind of solemn event that, to experience that and to find this firefighter. And basically what happened was later in that year of 2002, a story was published by a pretty famous journalist at the time that basically accused this fire company of, when they died, according to this journalist, they didn't die in the act of rescuing people. They died while looting merchandise from the underground shopping mall at the Trade Center. And it was, it was a sensational story. It got a lot of coverage at the time. It got a lot of pushback, and that kind of only fed the story more. And then eventually the story kind of faded away, but it always stayed with me that this company and this firefighter could be, accused so publicly of such a breach of duty and honor, and, and basically the pain that their family must have went through, hearing, seeing in print and talked about on the news that their loved ones are accused of a, terrible breach of honor, that they could be worried about, stealing things while people are dying upstairs, And I knew it couldn't be true. Any firefighter knew that there was no way it could be true. But really, at the time, it felt like there was no way of, really setting the record straight. And that's what stayed with me all those years. And that's what motivated me. And like I said, 15 years later, I decided I wanted to do my best to set the record straight and do my research into these firefighters and their actions that day and how they died and where these allegations came from. Because, they didn't come out of thin air. And truth be told, they didn't even come out of maliciousness from this journalist. This journalist was embedded in the rescue and recovery effort, and he was listening to, basically the grievances of other members. There were, engineers, construction workers, firefighters, police officers, all these groups, kind of put together down at this recovery site and it's a very difficult emotional time. There's competing priorities and interests, and it led to some, just negative confrontations and then gossip and rumors. And that's where I think this rumor came from. And the journalist, he printed it. So I wanted to investigate, the backstory of, how did these conditions come about? How did this controversy come about? Where did it come from? And do the best I could to, lay the controversy to rest, hopefully once and for all. And not only, I was able to, through witnesses, through video evidence and dispatcher tapes and maps of the site and everything I could find, not only was this crew not guilty of looting and stealing, they were heroes up until the last seconds of their life. They died in the lobby of the South Tower. They were in the act of using, what's called the jaws of life. It's actually called the Hearst tool, but you're familiar with the jaws of life that firefighters have. They were using that to free people who were trapped in an elevator car in the South Tower lobby. They had already rescued one woman who survived, and she, was a witness to their bravery. And they were actively working to rescue the rest of the occupants of this stalled elevator when the collapse occurred and killed them. So they were heroes up until the last second of their lives. And,
wow.
That's the story I wanted to tell.
How many people lost their lives? Are you asking about how many people died during 9/11? No, I think he's asking, here, Andrew, about the Triangle Shirtwaist Fire. How many people lost their lives?
Triangle Shirtwaist Fire? Sure. It was 146 workers died that day.
Wow. And then sorry, go ahead.
The majority, like 90% of them, were very young women, like as young as 14 years old, mostly around 17, 18 years old, all relatively recent immigrants to this country. Many of them had escaped very, persecution and violence and extreme poverty in their old countries, and were living in very hard conditions here, and working very long hours. So it's sad in a lot of ways, their stories, but the survivors, the surviving workers, the seamstresses and all who told their stories later in life, I found them to be inspiring in a lot of ways. A lot of them, many of them went on to live very long lives, and they gave interviews well into their 80s, about the event and stuff.
Wow. And I'm just curious, going back to your story about these heroes during 9/11 and John's story, were you ever able to contact his family and get in touch with people that he knew? And if you did, what did they think about you kind of vindicating him through the words in your book?
I did. I interviewed his father and talked to some other family members, in the research for the book. And then afterwards, a number of the family members reached out to me, and I was worried. I really, it was very important to me to get the story right and to tell John Tipping's story. And from what they communicated to me, they were happy with the story, and that meant a lot to me. I was very glad that that I was hopefully able to honor their son and their brother and the way I meant to.
Yeah. And going back to I know we're going back and forth here, but they all tie together. Going back to the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory Fire, Jim is asking here if you happen to know how many survivors there were from that.
Nobody knows for sure. There weren't exact records of how many workers even showed up that day. On any given day, I think there were up to 600 workers in the Triangle Company. The whole building had even more workers downstairs, but the upper three floors 8, 9, and 10, held just about 600 workers when they were at full strength. But this day was a Saturday, which was, I think, a little bit different for a work day for the company. And estimates are somewhere around 500 workers were in on those three floors when the fire broke out. So, but nobody really knows for sure.
Man, this is great. I'm actually going to order your books on Kindle. Hopefully they're available on Kindle when we hop off of here. But
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Before I do, what are the name of your books? How can people grab them? And if somebody wants to contact you, maybe to have you on their show, how can they?
Well, the historical novel about the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory Fire is Hell's 100 Acres. And the 9/11 memoir is called Finding John. They're available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, wherever you get your books. My website, andrewserra.com. You can get the books from the website, and you can contact me through the website. There's a contact page on there. So that's probably the easiest way to reach out.
Perfect. Thank you for everybody who has engaged. If you have more questions, drop them down below. And if we need to get them over to Andrew, then we can. And Andrew, thank you so much for coming and waiting as long as you did to come onto our show to share your story and the stories that you're sharing.
Thank you, Ashley.
Have a good day, everyone.